At the beginning, I would just like to say that I've read and reread The Lost Fragrance of Infinity, and I'm being very, very 100% sincere when I say that it's one of the best books I've ever read. I'm not saying it just to be nice to a fellow panelist. It's a brilliant book, and I loved it even more when I read it the second time. So I'm thrilled to be in conversation with Moin. And Moin, first of all, congratulations on a brilliant book. I think for most authors, it's very, very challenging to, have a successful first outing and then to follow it up with something as brilliant as this book. So I can sense that while the novel does captures the essence of Sufism, it is also a labor of love. Every word is filled with love and warmth, and it's a beautiful, immersive experience. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what went into the making of this labor of love?
Thank you, Anuja. Firstly, I thank all the wonderful people at the Bangalore Literature Festival, Shiny, for inviting me, and Anuja for making all of this happen. I'm desperately trying to get to India. I've made it halfway. I'm in Cairo now, so 5.5 hours have happened quite all right, and another 5.5 hours, and I should be in India after another few weeks. But thank you all for your patience and inviting me at the Bangalore Literature Festival. And thank you, Anuja, for your kind words of introduction, as well as your deep involvement in my writing and my book. The Lost Fragrance of Infinity is a book that stayed with me for many years. As I was growing up as a child, the influence of my grandfather, who was a theologian, as well as someone who was deeply involved in the Theosophical Society of India, particularly the Bombay edition. And so, Sufism is something which I grew up trying to understand. It's a vast, vast ocean, and anyone who says that he's understood Sufism completely is making a claim which is quite extravagant. I haven't understood it completely, but I have been under the stewardship of Sufi books and Sufi theology and Sufi philosophy for many years, and as a result of that, I was feeling this urge to write academic work on the account of Sufis, as well as the philosophy of Sufism, is something which would be confined only to the academic libraries, if you wish. And I wanted it to be a piece of work which got out to as many people as possible. And so that's how I decided to write a novel seeped in the concept of ishq, which is love. And I very quickly realized that you can't write about ishq or love in a theoretical manner, and that's why the evolution of this novel.
So tell us a little bit about your fascinating protagonist. He's called Karar Ali. For those of you who've read the book, you'll know that already. And there's something remarkable about this character, because people are drawn to him. People are drawn to his quiet sense of humor, his compassion, his ability to bring people of varying backgrounds together. So tell us a little bit about Karar Ali and his love story with Abira, because I think that was the stepping stone on which, this novel was built, on this beautiful relationship between two very, very lovely souls. Tell me a little bit about your protagonists.
Thank you, Anuja, for that question. And before I address the building of this character, Karar Ali, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the 5 aspects of Sufism that I needed to address when I started writing this novel. And through that, the evolution of this character, Karar Ali, actually happens. So the 5 important pillars, if you wish, of Sufism are: number 1 is compassion. Number 2 is thirst for knowledge, science and spirituality. Number 3 was the concept of khidmat khalq, which means the selfless service to mankind. Number 4 was the acceptance of a porous and fertile mind that loves the beauty of all religions. And number 5 was the concept of ishq, which I spoke about, which is love, and love of the divine, which is called ishq-e-hakiki, through ishq-e-majazi, which is the love of the divine through the created. And to address these 5 aspects of Sufism, I created this character called Qarar Ali, who's a craftsman, who's a vulnerable, sensitive craftsman. And through the development of this craftsman's character, I've tried to imbue in him the love for the arts, love for knowledge in terms of logic, that is mathematics, as well as the love for the spiritual side, show through his extrapolations of the Sufi philosophy his deeply compassionate heart, and then of course the understanding of the concept of ishq, which will take generations to understand, but still, because one Sufi said there are 308 layered meanings to the word ishq. So how does one show the love for the divine through the love of the created? And it is through his workmanship, through his craftsmanship of tile making, that he is able to demonstrate that, as well as his deeply profound spiritual and passionate love for a woman called Abira, who is, who comes from a background that is completely opposite of his. She's the daughter of a general, which means she has a fiery nature, which she's inherited from her father, independent, exquisitely educated. And he, on the other side, is a man who's sensitive, vulnerable, deeply driven by the creative spirit. And so I thought these elements would play a vital role in building this character. But the key aspects were to show the beauty of these 5 aspects of Sufism through this character, and how he evolves through a period of time with this love for this woman, and how she influences him in terms of bringing out the best of his ability to create. And to sum it up, basically, there's a fantastic verse of Saadi, one of the finest Sufi poets. And he said, God created creation because God himself wanted to be loved. If he hadn't created creation, how would we all love him? So, the concept that God himself needs to be loved is something that I tried to build through this character.
That was beautiful. Thanks so much. And, I mentioned that this novel was a very immersive experience for me, because I didn't know anything much about Sufism at the time, and it can be a little overwhelming. He mentioned it's like an ocean, and yet when you're traveling with Qarar Ali, it's so nice that you get to explore the finest things about Sufism. And the novel starts in Hindustan, and then suddenly, because of circumstances, Qarar finds himself in parts of the Ottoman Empire. He goes where the heart of Sufism is, and he travels further, and he winds up in Andalusia. So, and when I read that, I was transported. I haven't really been to any of these places. In fact, even Delhi, I've just been there a couple of times. So it was lovely to be transported halfway, over the 7 seas through this book. And I could tell that, Moin, you've traveled. I think you follow. I don't know whether Qarar followed in your footsteps or whether you followed in his. But do tell us about your travels and your favorite anecdotes from that period.
Thank you, Anuja. Sufis were great travelers. They carried within themselves multicultural identities. A large number of Sufis came to India. They went to Spain. They moved around in Central Asia. And so travel becomes an incredibly important part in their thirst for knowledge. in their quest for knowledge. And without really traveling and experiencing different cultures, understanding what the beauty of their literature is, their philosophy is, the evolution of a Sufi mind would not happen. In fact, it would be stagnant. So travel becomes an incredibly integral part of a Sufi's quest for knowledge as well as the divine. Now, the challenge for me was to incorporate that into my novel. And the only way I thought I could do that, along with showing the fact that the destruction of a perfect life does not necessarily mean the end of life. And, Karar Ali in 1738 is leading a perfectly harmonious and beautiful life. He's managed to find the beautiful love of a lady. He's been able to ingratiate himself with the emperor and get various kinds of rewards for his accomplishments as a craftsman. He's been bestowed with land and all of that. And so he's living a relatively comfortable life. And the perfect life gets shattered. When the perfect life gets shattered, it is that becomes the trigger to deeply explore oneself. And the only way he does that is through travel. And while he was compelled to leave Hindustan because of the rapacity and the carnage led by Nadir Shah in Delhi and the massacre that he and his family suffer, and through that he has to leave and flee Delhi, I decided to travel through the bastions of Sufism, so that I myself could immerse myself and learn about what these fantastic teachings were all about. And that meant I had to start my journey in Fatehpur Sikri at the shrine of Salim Chishti, who's a renowned Sufi and who was greatly, who's still greatly revered. And I understood the art and the craftsmanship of Gireh, geometric tile making, as well as geometric shape making, which was a part of the Sufi culture, where mathematics and mysticism and poetry merged and blended. From Fatehpur Sikri, I went to Delhi, which was again a bastion of Nizamuddin Aulia. And then from Delhi, I, with my very supportive wife, without whom all of this would not have been possible, I landed up in Samarkand, which is in Uzbekistan, and all the wonderful aspects of Samarkand and Bukhara were unraveled through the beautiful buildings and the craftsmanship of the geometric tiles that you see on those buildings, particularly the Ulugh Beg Observatory, which is a place where the Sufis studied astronomy and planets and solar system through mathematics. And then from there, we moved to Anatolia, which is in modern day Turkey, in a place called Bursa. And, I had the most fascinating encounter, Anuja, in Bursa, which is, when you think of Turkey today, the first thing you think of is Istanbul. It's a given. You think Istanbul. But people tend to neglect this really small and obscure town called Bursa. And Bursa has this most extraordinary mosque called Yesel Kami Mosque. And the mosque has the most fascinating Gireh tile work on it. And as part of my research to understand Gireh tile work, which was a craftsmanship that the Sufis had kind of promoted and propagated, I happened to have a chance encounter with a Sufi who was sitting outside working with his craftsmen. And he spoke to me about these fantastic geometric shaped tiles. And he said, look at these tiles. One is a hexagon, the other one is an octagon, the other one is a star, triangles, all of that. What does that tell you? And I didn't have an answer. And the Sufi said, this is the diversity of mankind. Different races, different cultures, different languages, different cuisines, different people, all coming together and interlocking. And when mankind comes together, man is at his productive best and he is enlightened. So think of these geometric shapes in these tiles as a diversity of mankind coming together. And when I had that encounter with that man, I knew that I had found my story. And from there, I went to Istanbul and I spent a lot of time in Rumi's lodge. From there, I went to Rumi's shrine, which is in Konya. And from there, I proceeded to southern Spain, Andalusia, where I could see this fantastic tile trail ending up in the Alhambra, which is where I take my protagonist. So my travel became the journey of the protagonist. Sorry, I took up so much of your time, but that's a question that needed a bit of answering.
No, please don't apologize. I think we loved listening to the story of your journey, because we traveled along with you, and it's been great. And speaking of journeys, one of the things I loved about the book is, for those of us who can't take off and travel whenever we want, I love that the Sufis emphasized that mostly whatever you seek is within you. It's about looking inward. It's about finding fulfillment in acts of kindness and compassion. I thought that was one of the most beautiful things in the book, because you have a protagonist who learns that there is respectability and there's deep meaning in the restoration of ruins. I think there's a beautiful passage where you talk about how preservation is even more important than creation itself. And just those little things which he did, because I think somebody like Nadir Shah, at the end of the day, though we know he's a tyrant, we can't help being attracted to the bad boys of history, because they ruled with brute strength, and we respond to that. Whereas here we have a protagonist who ruled. I feel he ruled all the lives he touched just by being kind, just by being sweet, a very sweet guy who does thoughtful things. Like when he sees old people trying to get to the church on Easter, he'll immediately get his horse, his friend's donkey, and he'll just transport them. Just small things like that, which makes it all so meaningful, which is like, I feel it's more important than ruling over an empire and leaving so much destruction in your wake. So could you just elaborate on those beautiful themes of Sufism?
Thank you, Anuja. That is beautifully put. And I'm now convinced that you have, read my book twice, which is great. I needed to address one particular issue, or two particular qualities in man, which we are all, which we carry in our hearts. And it is the unimpeachable truth that we carry ego and we carry hypocrisy. There is no human being in this world that is not a hypocrite and that is not egotistical. We all have an ego. We all have hypocrisy. The Sufis teach us how to overcome this and how to brush aside ego and hypocrisy. And the only way you can do that is through, you don't have to be a game changer. You don't have to be someone, as you rightly said, Anuja, who rewrites history books through conquest and land acquisition. You can conquer your ego. You can conquer your hypocrisy by doing small acts of goodness and kindness. And this is what the craftsman does as he travels through his journey. But he is able to do that only over a period of time, because he himself has an ego. He himself at times witnesses hypocrisy. For example, as he progresses in his day-to-day life in Delhi, he becomes the chosen hand of the emperor as his chosen craftsman, as his chosen as his chosen artisan. And he reaches a stage in his life where he is the supreme restorer of mausoleums, of tile work, of artistry. And that is an ego that he carries within him, that he is the greatest restorer. And it is only through his journey that he realizes that he must shatter that ego and carry within himself a sense of humility and an understanding of being kind towards others. Because unless and until he keeps doing those little acts of kindness, he is a slave to his own ego. Because while he is in India, he has reached the zenith of his career. But when he faces despair, and he is shellacked and he faces a shattering experience, he is nowhere in life and no one knows him. And he has to rebuild that ability of self-respect by understanding that he has to kill his ego. And when he goes into Andalusia and when he goes into Spain, he realizes that the only way he can do that is by helping the old people. He can only do that is by distributing fruits to the kind folk, to the sick and ailing in Spain. And the only way he can make a mark is by understanding that it is the heart that needs to be polished rather than mad, wild ambitions of conquest and desire. And so he's able to do that, but it's a, there's a constant conflict. And that constant conflict, as you rightly pointed out, is overcome only by an inward journey, by understanding what does it mean to be a human, what does it mean to be someone who is deeply sensitive and someone who can share in the sorrows, griefs, and in the highs of other people. So yeah.
Speaking of conflict, I'm afraid I'm going to ask you a somewhat dicey question, because you talked about how Karar Ali was shellacked. He was literally toned down. He was broken down, and he had to find the strength to swim across an ocean of grief in order to get closer to his art, in order to rebuild his life and, have a wonderful life. So the thing is, my question is, the reason most of us are content to just be selfish, indulge our base desires, is because of the price demanded by art, right? I mean, for me personally, I hate getting started on a book. I hate it. I can't begin to describe how hard that first step is, because I know the price that's being asked. And the second thing is, I'm always scared of how far I'm willing to go for art. I'm willing to pay the devil his due, in a manner of speaking. So, how do you suggest artists and just people in general deal with this extreme within us, finding that sense of balance which the Sufis had mastered, which I think, the spiritual masters in it, belonging to any faith mastered, it's easier said than done, because I think it's simpler to just wallow in selfishness and just enjoy life's shallow pleasures and just keep schlepping on.
Yeah, thank you for that great question again, Anuja. I think one of the most incredible books that I read, and you read as well, which has influenced me immensely, is a book on Michelangelo called Agony and Ecstasy, and it really brings to life the pain and the great joy, the suffering and the great ecstasy of being in the creative space. The end product hopefully comes out reasonably all right, and we have sessions like this. But the process of doing something and creating something can be quite self-annihilating. It can also be, while it can be self-enriching, it can be self-annihilating. And what I mean by that is, it's a beautiful struggle. And while a creative person sees the beauty in the struggle, there is no running from the fact that it is a struggle. You yourself said it's very difficult to begin a book, putting pen to paper, putting the first word down. And in the same way, in my book that I wrote, it was a beautiful struggle, because I was trying to imbue the character with the same feelings that I was feeling as I was creating this book, and what he would be going through in creating the most beautiful geometric tiles against the backdrop of an emotion that has been savagely destroyed by a man filled with greed and ego. So when you put your protagonist in that space, and that protagonist starts inhabiting that space of savagery, of destruction, of anything and everything that you feel, you then start feeling a sense of probably a creative outburst in terms of words. But then once again, you've got to kind of fine-tune the narrative, fine-tune the storyline, the characters as you take the book through. And that's the case with anyone who's creative. Some of the finest painters, some of the finest poets, some of the finest philosophers, they've gone through great deals of of strife. I mean, Van Gogh, for example, chopped his ear off because the guy just couldn't get to terms with what he was going to do next. So you've got. I mean, I haven't chopped my ear off or cut cut my
cut
arm
off my
off my
nose.
fingers. But frustration levels during the creative process are exceptionally high, especially when you're dealing or tackling things like philosophy and art and poetry, because these are deeply passionate aspects of the creative space that one tries to inhabit.
Okay, I have to share this with you. It's my favorite takeaway from the book, actually. In Moin's book, there's a passage where he discusses a work by a great Sufi saint. It's the Diwani Hafiz. Not sure I'm pronouncing it right, but the one of the protagonists believes that it's a Sufi belief, actually. So you open this book and just you open it randomly and you let your eyes fall on a particular passage from this massive volume, and apparently that could suggest your future. So I found a copy of Diwani Hafiz online, and I've been doing this every day, and I decided that it was a typically whimsical Sufi ruse to get you to read Hafiz every day. And it's a beautiful blessing. Believe me, I get my friends to do it. And we read a passage, we screenshot it and send it to each other. And then we spend time interpreting what it could mean. And believe me, having him in your life is just so amazing. And I have to thank Moin for it, because his is a book which keeps on giving, even after you've turned the last page. And I wanted to ask Moin, what's his favorite takeaway from this book?
Thank you, Anuja. Again, before I answer that about my favorite takeaway, the Diwani Hafiz, you've pronounced it beautifully. It's absolutely right. Well done. The Diwani Hafiz is a collection of poetry of arguably one of the greatest poets that emerged out of Iran. And it was deeply philosophical, and it reached a stage where it was thought of as a book that can guide you through your life. Now, to understand Hafiz is a very difficult task, and I don't claim to be a master of understanding Hafiz. I read Hafiz, but he's a complicated man, and he's been a complicated poet. But as his works progressed, and as people tried to understand his work, the legend that built around the Diwani Hafiz was called the Fal. And the Fal basically is that if you are in a deeply meditative spot, or you are in a spot of bother, and with great devotion to the verses, if you were to shut your eyes and open the book and then put your finger on wherever your finger lands, and then you were to open your eye, it probably is Hafiz giving you a direction towards the future of your life. Now, it can be debated and spoken of at great length, but this is what people kind of say, that this is the power of his verses. And so it comes with a lot of depth, Hafiz's words. But what has been the favorite part of my book? I think the favorite part of my book, Anuja, is when Qarar Ali successfully destroys the hypocrisy and the ego within him. As I said, ego resides in all of us. And it is only through living in obscurity, after having lived the life of someone who has been lavishly ordained by an emperor, and then suddenly living the life in obscurity, it is then that he destroys his ego. And that, to me, is the most has been the most favorite part of my book, because when I finished writing that particular passage of that book, I realized that I have done justice. Well, I thought I've done justice to a particular human aspect where the pangs of ego were blunted by the beautiful verses of Rumi, and I was able to incorporate that in that particular passage of the book.
And just one more thing to tell Moin, actually, he's managed something which my English teachers never managed. I'm a prose kind of girl. Poetry makes me extremely impatient, but I've fallen in love. Especially, it wasn't just Hafiz. There are so many amazing verses in Moin's book, and I've written them down. I share it on Twitter, Instagram, and I love it. And Hafiz, I read that passage and I read a few more pages. It's like, I really have to thank Moin for that. And we have just 5 minutes. So I'm going to do something very grudgingly. I'd rather have him all to myself and ask him a few more questions, but I'm going to let the audience come up here, grab the mic and quickly ask him any questions you'd wish to. We have a full house here, and I think it's really cool that you have all come and been such an amazing audience. So do come. Yes, please do come and ask your question.
Hi, Moin.
Hi.
My entry into the Sufi world was with Elif Shafak's 40 Rules of Love. And I think that just opened a whole universe. I haven't read your book, but I'd love to. I think my question is trying to find the balance in the Sufi journey is something that I'm on. I'm looking for a community. Can you direct me to, I don't know, any Sufi masters who exist across India, or a community that kind of practices this, right? And trying to, I think that's my journey, because I'm lost and I'm trying to find someone I can shadow, and meet. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your wonderful question. The title of my book is The Lost Fragrance of Infinity. And the reason I titled that is because I tried to find the beauty, the rationality, the passion, and most importantly, the ability to balance, as you rightly said, tawazun. In Farsi and Urdu, there's a word called tawazun, which means balance. The tawazun between science and spirituality that the Sufis talk about. And I'm afraid I was not able to find, any Sufi house or Sufi propulgators that are really speaking this particular language. There are a few, and I'm not going to name them because, with all due respect, they haven't struck me in the heart as yet, because some of them get confined only to, dare I say this, only to the worship of God. And Sufism was way bigger than that. It was about, yes, worship of God, but also about living in this day and age, understanding science and mathematics and all of that, and astronomy and all of that. And I have not been able to find that balance as yet. So I have to admit, I would be lying and I would be giving you a wrong direction if I directed you towards people that I myself wouldn't go to. So I'm terribly sorry. What I can direct you towards is my book. Please read that.
Please do. Thank you so much, Moin. And I would like to just add in conclusion that like your protagonist, Karar Ali, I think you are also a master craftsman, a restorer, and I think you've made a huge contribution towards keeping the gentle spirit of Sufism alive and well. It's been a pleasure and privilege to read your book and to interact with you here. Thank you ever so much. And please, I would love to have a concluding statement from you as well before we wind up.
Well, thank you, Bangalore Literature Festival, Shiny, and Anuja. Thank you so much for taking the time and reading my book, reviewing my book in the New Indian Express. You've been most kind and most generous with your understanding of the book, not just your words. There's a difference, and you've understood aspects and nuances of the book. So thank you for that. The only thing I would say is the Sufis stood for the 5 things that I spoke about. And if we can incorporate those in our lives, I think we as mankind, forget about Muslim, Hindu, Christian, faith, all of that, forget about that. I think we as mankind will be a far more enriched species if we incorporate the beauty of compassion, the beauty of the beauty of ishq, the beauty of understanding science and mathematics together, and these fantastic qualities that they spoke about. So and the destruction of ego and hypocrisy. So if we incorporate that within ourselves, I think we as a species would take a gentle step in making us a better kind of people, and this world a better place.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, audience.